People can never, ever, ever buy into the lie that your political opposition is your political opposition solely because they're evil. That has occurred at times in history, but it is the exception, not the rule. And that more often than not, the people on either side of it are far more similar than they think they are.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate and actual performance may differ. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
And we are back with another edition of the Daily Dots. And I am joined as always by the brain trust himself, Mr. Chase Taylor. And we're going to cover market and finance stuff. But we're recording today at about 12:40, so about 15, 20 minutes before the market closes. And we just found out in the last 15, 20 minutes about Charlie Kirk being what appears to be assassinated at a student event in Utah. And again, I know people that log on here for finance and investment stuff, but so many thoughts. A young father, husband, 2 babies getting left behind. So many thoughts. And I think the only thing I feel really any clarity about is that I think all of us need to keep in mind the need to stand up for our beliefs and defend them vociferously. But also remember that these people are our neighbors and our countrymen. And some humanity needs to get injected back into this because it scares me. Because we're at a cultural precipice. I think that there are enough strains in the system at present to rip us apart and for a lot more of this kind of stuff to happen. And stand up for what we believe in, but also not lose our compassion and our kindness and our affinity for our fellow man, and to remember that at the end of the day, people are parents and children and spouses. It's a dark day.
No doubt about that.
And the part that gets me so frustrated and heartbroken and all that, but so frustrated is, already seeing some of the tweets and it could be bots and stuff like that, not from verifiable people, but making horrific comments that are all too easy to predict. People can never, ever, ever buy into the lie that your political opposition is your political opposition solely because they're evil. That has occurred at times in history, but it is the exception, not the rule. And that more often than not, the people on either side of it are far more similar than they think they are. And what they find out is that they've paid a tremendous price to execute somebody else's ambitious plan. You know what I mean? Like they were sold a bill of goods for somebody else's political ambitions or somebody else's military ambitions, right? And you can, and I'm not a Nazi apologist by any stretch of the imagination, but there were a lot of good people that got caught up into that, right? Like you're a Nazi. There were Nazis that were not there because they tried to be a Nazi. You know what I mean? Like there's always humanity on the other side. And I'm not saying that we don't call evil out when we see it. We do, but it's not the rule, right? Are there evil people out there? Yes. But it's not your average neighbor. Even if you voted for the other guy in the last election, right? and you just see it, and you just see this degradation and this continuing loss of compassion and loss of empathy and just humanness. In an era where we're supposedly more focused on sensitivity, right? And yet we're becoming less human. And I just think that one of the things that we can remember, and I'm not saying that this is enough activity, but what I do know for a fact that every good person, especially those that are believers in Christ or those that believe in many of the other religions, right? I know what we were called to do. We were called to be kindness in the voice of hate, right? Calm in the voice of violence. And I think all of us desperately need to remember that the opposition are people, and to take a little bit of effort to just lower the rhetoric to some degree on our own, right? Not fight for what you believe in, not saying that. But just to do it with at least a veneer of humanity. What are your, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, I mean, what always makes these things worse and is the dehumanizing rhetoric and kind of making things into a Disney movie where you have a really well cast bad guy and a really well cast good guy, and like you have to be one of those, and there's nothing in the middle. And obviously we've seen that. Like we all know political polarization has been rather intense and extreme. One of the things I've taken some heart in is, 2025. There's been clear political turmoil, a lot of political change, and in some ways very unprecedented, and yet not political violence. Like that was something I thought as a country we could hang our hat on. And so to see that change today is just incredibly disheartening and scary, because what you fear it could turn into.
And there's also the ancillary things that are troubling, right? We talked about the one lady that was murdered recently on the train in North Carolina, and as horrific as that was, just as horrific to me were 5 people sitting in the same train car videotaping it,
and then
they didn't even help her,
right?
And when I start adding these things up, and I'm not extrapolating this across the entire, but when I keep adding these things up, I think we would all be remiss if we didn't step back and say, wait a second, something's going on here, right? We're losing our humanity. And it does not seem to be a one-off thing, right? What is that? Now, as a person of faith, I believe it's a direct consequence of removing faith and all and literally all aspects from society. I think plays a major role. But even then, it doesn't really have to. I mean, it's just the level and the intensity and the temperature of the rhetoric. What I will say, man, is if again, and I'm not talking about vociferously fighting for your beliefs. I'm talking about when it takes a toxic turn. I'm talking about when it's death to the enemy, right? Death to the opposition, that kind of stuff. And I think it's a good guide that we should all keep in the front of our minds. If you catch yourself going down that road, stop. Something's off. You've gone too far. You shouldn't be thinking about it that way. You shouldn't be looking at it that way. And to inject humanity, because it's the old adage: what good is it beating the monster if you become one in the process?
Right.
And that's what's happening, right? And history's also been replete with a bunch of examples of what you thought was a monster wasn't. It was a misunderstanding. And in most cases, that's what most monsters have ended up being,
I mean, yeah.
So anyway, that one, I just, being a dad and a husband, you just sit there and he's a young man, 28 years old. It hits different when you sit there and you go, that's the end of a family. That's the end of dreams. That's the end of legacies. That's ugh. And for those of you that haven't seen it, I don't advise watching it. I wish I wouldn't have seen it.
Yep, I never advise watching those things.
No, I just didn't
Made
think
that
it would be
mistake.
as graphic. I honestly didn't. It's
Yeah.
bad. It's really bad.
Made that mistake in the Afghanistan, Iraq days
Oh yeah.
of watching some of those videos early on.
Oh well, some of them you had to watch, right?
A couple times maybe, but
Yeah, it's these are concerning times.
The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate, and actual performance may differ.
All right. God, it feels trite. You know,
way to make the
pivoting.
awkward transition to the market.
Yeah, just pivoting back to something like that. But you know, it is what it is. So why don't you give us a rundown on the indexes and the major?
Yep. So we got about 9 minutes to go. S&P up 0.28, Q's flat, IWM up 0.2, equal weight up 0.1, Mag 7 down about 0.5%, all world ex-US up 0.23, dollar up 0.08, Bitcoin at 113 and change, up about 1.75%, oil up almost 2, getting close to 64, and I have a comment for oil later. Gold down 0.14, silver up about 0.5%. Palladium up 5.8, which may have something to do with the Russian incursion into Polish airspace last night, which maybe we could talk about too, but palladium's up 5.8%. The 2-year yield's down 1 basis point, the 10-year yield is down 4 basis points. And then vol is pretty flat. The September contract down 0.8, but the ETF down 0.14. It's pretty flat there. Kind of, I think probably the biggest equity news of the day is Oracle, and it's up about 36% here with 8 minutes to go now.
I believe we sold our Oracle today. We owned it in our momentum portfolio.
Yeah, I think it sold half of it, I want to say.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, impressive quarter. We can dig into the Oracle one. That's obviously the headline everybody's focused on. There's one thing though about this that I don't think that people are really paying a lot of attention to, is that this is basically revenue they're forecasting out, and that there are any number of things that could make that number way off.
Yeah. I mean, there are agreements for the future. So speaking of, in the kind of middle of the day, there was news drop that Oracle had a deal with OpenAI for $300 billion.
Yep.
So the reason that's notable to me is this year OpenAI is expected to do $13 billion in revenue and lose on net $5 billion. So they're spending 18 to make 13 this year, and they're going to somehow pay Oracle $300 billion over the next 5 years. Like, just, that's intense. That's all I got. I'm not saying it can't happen, but that's intense.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff you're looking at for some of Oracle's like revenue projections are tied to things like, I guess you could say Silicon Valley basically giving Oracle $300 billion through OpenAI, because OpenAI isn't going to make that much money.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
That's a private donation in hopes for some sort of return in the future.
Yeah. I would also be interested to see, I didn't dig into it, but I saw that Michael Saylor was personally selling MSTR. I don't know how much.
Yeah.
I didn't even dig into the headline. I just saw it. I would be very interested to see if there were any stock sales for Mr. Ellison. I wouldn't think so. Larry's been in the game for so long. He's 81. He's now the richest. Yeah, he's now the most, or 80 or 81.
Yeah,
richest man in the world now after the stock move.
Yep.
I wouldn't anticipate he's trying. If they gave that as guidance, they're one of those companies where I'm like, I have a hard time seeing them purpose it. Let's put it this way: I will grant far more credibility and a much higher level of veracity to any projections that Larry Ellison and Oracle put out than I would like Robinhood.
Yeah,
you know what I mean,
right?
Like, so,
and they have a long track record. I mean, this company's been around forever.
They have a long track record. And here's the crazy part. Even after a move like today, if those projections are close to real, this stock's probably still a buy here.
It's a sub-$1 trillion company. that would be worth way more than $1 trillion if that all holds up.
Yeah.
And the legacy business stuff, as long as it does reasonable.
Yeah.
But if this cloud AI revenue goes as parabolic as they think it might, like, it's worth more than that.
Yeah.
For sure. Which is why I went up, 40% a day. Is like people have to discount, like, well, hold on.
Yeah.
Let me do the math. Oh yeah, like
it's kind of a big deal.
It's a weird thing because the 40% day up could be very, very justified. And it could also be like, you could look back on it in 2 years and be like, wow, remember that day Oracle went crazy, and with their crazy like projections that didn't even come close to being fulfilled,
Yeah, because I mean that's all they are at the end of the day is projections. And if it was a more mature business, you could put a lot more stock in those projections.
Yeah.
The problem is you could have a breakthrough of one kind that completely changes the math. You know what I mean? Like for instance, I mean, remember the DeepSeek stuff? I believe that prompted what, a 40% sell off in NVIDIA stock?
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. So, you and I were talking about this one in the beginning. And again, this isn't a recommendation. When I look at something like this, the way I look at it is like you and I were talking about, let's see if we can get this on a pullback at some point. If we do the research, we check it out, it looks good. Our situation is a little bit different though, because we've already benefited from this pop because we owned it in the momentum portfolio.
So we had TSM doing well on it. Like,
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, I'll go back to Google. Like
that's you.
I'm just sitting there going, hey guys, if it's this good for Oracle, it's going to be this good for Google.
Right. They also do plenty of cloud stuff, right?
So, yeah. And
AI stuff.
Yeah. And I think in that space, they're even a bigger player than Oracle.
Yeah.
So, what else do we see today? Precious metals, hanging in there remarkably well. Keep grinding higher.
Yeah, metal's pretty flat, but miners up 2%. So
and gold back to pushing that 3,700 level. Still feels like you're overdue for a pullback, but been saying that for a while. Anything else? I'm trying to think.
So one other thing I wanted to mention was on oil.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have been kind of surprised by how well it's kind of, including myself, how well it's kind of hung in, given the fact that OPEC Plus is adding so much production back. But the reality is, since March, China has added about 130 million barrels to their kind of strategic stockpiles. So really, it's just like one giant sugar daddy buyer just backing the truck up, which is a little unnerving if kind of looking forward, because if they're already shifting from like fuel to like plastics and stuff because they don't need the fuel anymore, like so you may get to the point where they're just literally saturated, and then it's like, all right, now what, because if they stop buying to plug, to beef up strategic stockpiles, like there is no new buyer, so then you get like the supply swamp just blasts you, and then you're in the 40s maybe. So that's worth thinking about. And I knew they were buying, but I didn't realize it was that much, 130 million barrels in 6 months.
You know what I think about energy? Especially oil. Everybody knows, if you've played it at all or even watched, trying to figure out the short term movements and where they're going. Good luck, right? Here's what I do know. And again, not an official recommendation, but what I would tell to any portfolio is, hey, go back to a historically average weighting of energy in your portfolio that reflects the historical average weighting of energy. That's what I think the answer is, right? Because if you look at the component that energy plays now in the S&P 500, I think it's like 3%. Historically, I think that weighting is more like 12 or 13, right? Go back. That would be my advice. Go back to the store, because if I look, here's what I do think. I do think in the not too distant future, we will sit there and be like, oil was probably a buy in the low 60s. I think in the not too distant future, we will think that current nat gas prices were probably presented very good entry points. I think even a lot of the uranium plays, will you get a chance to buy it lower? I'd be surprised if you didn't, but I think you'll probably look back and see this is a pretty good level to own those things too. I would just say, hey, don't try to be perfect, right? Be diversified and know that, that's the other thing I don't think people think. Every time you see a quarter like this announced by Oracle, we're going to need a lot more power.
Yeah. I mean,
you know what I mean? That's like a very simple way to look at it. But
as long as all the current trends hold and the efficiencies and everything, like And even the hard problem with that is like, if you go back to the DeepSeek moment, something I'm proud of was mentioning Jevons paradox before Satya Nadella did. But that was the point I made originally, was like, yes, this is going to be, it'll make it cheaper and more efficient, but then we'll just use more, and then it kind of won't be. Like, in the end, you're still using as much or more power, right? So like, I keep catching myself wanting to be like, well, maybe it gets really efficient, and then I think about it, I'm like, well, then we'll just
Use more
do
compute.
more of it, right?
Yeah.
So like, currently it feels difficult to imagine, as useful as AI looks, right? It's difficult to imagine a scenario where you're like, oh, thankfully we can use less electricity next year than we did this year. It just doesn't feel like a thing right now.
No, and when you look at the way all that's going, I mean, and then think about robots replacing human beings, all the stuff everybody's talking about, all of that's requiring substantially more energy, right? Not to mention building it all. I mean, everything you see rolling out, I just think to myself, that's energy intensive. That's energy intensive.
Right. And this is the reason I don't think we talked about on the show, but like, I'm very bullish solar, and it's basically because, and we're starting to like shut down some offshore wind projects and stuff. And my view is like, oh, we need every electron we can get. Like, I don't care if it's people riding a bike to generate power, we need that. And for context, like, every time you do something on Chat GPT, this is a stat I heard this week, I think, but it's basically the same as running a refrigerator all day for each prompt you do.
No kidding.
So like, it's still energy intensive. And if you're doing hardcore complex like coding and stuff, then it's more, right? Or like, all the models have like a deep dive thing now where it'll be like, hey, give me 3 minutes to crunch this hard and I'll get back to you. Not like make me a meme in 2 seconds.
Yeah. And then every single one of those you do, then you've got to offset that with cooling, because you got to have the cooling to push it down. And
so, as the adoption ramps, the power use, I mean, it's pretty significant. So like, we need every electron we can get. So to be purposefully taking some offline, it's like, I don't know, man. Like, if you're going to take that offline, you need that much more of every other kind you're going to get, right? So you need that much more nuclear, that much more gas, that much more solar.
Well, the other thing too, like we were talking about on our investment call yesterday, was we have to be thinking about, like, one of the biggest issues I had with solar were the embedded inefficiencies, meaning, the degradation of
the sun out.
Yeah, right. Well, and then even, so you've got couple, right? So you've got, how much of that sun energy are we actually gathering? And then remember, all of that we gather, only a percentage of that is going to be retained in storage, right? And then if you ship it, you lose even more. And so the question is yes, you can generate, especially on site, if like you got solar panels on top of a house, can be really, really useful, right? But anytime you got to move them long distances, the fall off and the loss is really big. And so, but what you're effectively talking about then is a physics problem, right? And one of the things I think we need to be very open-minded about, and we need to be conscious of, is that AI is going to change a lot of that. And I think AI is going to get improvements, and if not fixes, to a lot of these physics problems.
Battery chemistry and stuff.
Yep. That have been
improved based on speeding up the R&D.
And people are like, oh, you're being too optimistic. No, I'm not. Go back and listen to the interview we just did with Brad Sarsfield, the head of AI security at Microsoft, when he was talking about how the AI made the chips 2.5 to 3 times more efficient, with more compute power, right? So that kind of same dynamic will play out. Right. And think about how quick it did that to those AI chips.
And we already see this in like material science. So directly applicable to batteries, like, and this is like a year old, so this is probably already better. But if you think about, like, if you're doing R&D and you say you want to like test out some new battery chemistries that essentially no one's ever tried, right? Just science experiment. That's how we actually innovate.
Yep.
Let's say you come up with 1,000 different ideas to give it a shot, right? This is the kind of thing you can plug into AI, and it can tell you like, hey, don't even try these 970 because they're stupid, in a way that you wouldn't know. So then it's like, instead of trying 1,000 experiments, let's try 30 experiments. And that just, like, it speeds up that timeline so much for like really good research and development. So it's stuff like that it may seem small, but that's actually a huge deal.
It will speed up.
As Brad mentioned, like, this whole thing's a big time saver.
Yeah, it will speed up innovation what in my opinion, what you're seeing it do on the compute side of things, those doors it's opening, it's going to speed up innovation in every industry.
Yeah.
Right. It just is. It's a time, like you said, it's a time compressor. And that was what I was talking about on our investment meeting the other day is we all have these built-in timelines into our heads. And, you know, for instance, we'll reference how long it took for the internet to spread, right? And how long it took for that to catch on, and how long it took for mass adoption of social media. All of those things are pretty uniform because they involve humans, right? And humans have always been the constraint in, you know, in the creation of new things, right? Innovation. We were the constraint. Well, we no longer are. And so I would expect all of those timelines to compress. I think we need to be open to, you know, 5 to 7 years from now. I think 5 to 7 years now is now 2 to 3, generally speaking.
Right.
And I just think you're going to see this stuff. You're going to see things go from talked about, rumored concept to reality way faster than we've seen it happen in the past.
Yeah. And when it comes to the power side, back to my view, like that you need all of it, right? To me, this turns into like a constraint versus preference thing. And my view is constraints will beat preferences 99 out of 100 times. Stealing that from Marko Papic, like, so we're going after wind really hard. We're also going after solar to a degree, and like the solar, you know, industry thinks like, ooh, we're gonna do less than we thought, you know, because of it. But in my view is like, cool, like 18 months from now, when it's literally like, you know, regular people are seeing 20% gains in power prices, giant political problem, and then whenever the AI people are like, we're kind of hitting a wall here because we don't have enough power. Like literally we're hitting a wall. Then that's a thing where like the pressure on policymakers to go, I get that you don't like that stuff, but we have to have it. Yeah. And then it just, you re-unleash the maybe least desirable sources of power because you just need all of them at that point. So I think you may have like a weird like boomerang where it looks like that stuff's doing bad, but then we all recognize a year or two from now, like, oh no, we have to have it. This is exactly how I reached the conclusion on nuclear. Like, was AI? I mean, this is like 2 years ago, but it just became clear we have to win the AI race, and the only way to win the AI race, medium term, is to do as much nuclear as possible. Yeah. But I think a lot of people that like me, like our kind of vibe of, you know, not being bashing it, fossil fuels and liking nuclear and stuff are like, whoa, renewables? Like, no, but the same like thing applies. Like it's literally the same idea, right? So,
yeah. Well, yeah, and again, we've got to be open-minded, right? Like I've never been opposed to quote unquote alternative energy. What I get opposed to is when people are arbitrarily pushing it to the top of the stack when it's not ready for prime time,
or being too big of a proportion of the grid is incredibly not cool. Like it doesn't work well.
No, and it's massively irresponsible. Energy is sort of important, right? and playing politics with it to me is just idiotic,
right?
And
this is where like those advancements in batteries and cost declines and that stuff, all of a sudden like it goes from being like this absurd over subsidized thing that shouldn't even be there to like making some sense. I was a hardcore skeptic of solar and kind of just penciling out where this stuff is now, and you're like, I didn't realize it, but this is actually starting to make some sense. And then as long as you keep seeing reasonable cost declines in the battery stuff and innovation, like it's better at its job and it does it cheaper, then all of a sudden solar makes tons of sense.
Yeah.
And not just grid scale, but like on your house. I listened to a good podcast with a guy that runs a battery company where they lease the battery to you. And then you have solar that feeds the battery. And then at certain peak times, whenever they can get a bunch of money for your power, they will take it from your battery and sell it onto the grid
and credit to your account.
But at the same time, you have backup power on the battery when you need it. And they get to just kind of shave off those crazy peaks to make themselves some money. So like, it seems pretty win-win. And to listen to him talk about like the trajectory of their costs on those batteries, on the literal hardware, you recognize like, oh, this makes some sense now, but it makes a crazy amount of sense 2 years from now.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think anything that you've looked at, the minute what I started thinking about, where I started opening up against or to alternatives like solar, was the AI thing, where I sat there and I went, okay, so now, because we always said eventually one day battery technology will be at a place where, at least on a small scale, like for an individual homeowner, solar will make a lot of sense. There are places in the country where that's already the case, where solar makes tons of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it has grown substantially in Texas.
Yep.
For a reason.
And watch, I mean, those panels are going to get better way quicker than people think. And the ability to store that energy is going to get better than people think. And I can't, I mean, it feels kind of weird to say it because I've been a guy that's laughed at solar for so long.
Same.
And the reasons we did were fair and valid at that point, just meaning you're sitting there going, look, guys, the speed of innovation and where you're at in terms of physics, you're not going to bridge that gap. And you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It's just the numbers don't work. But now you're looking at, the progress they've already made, which I think is more than a lot of us thought they'd make by now.
Yeah.
And then just knowing that you're about to get an AI ramp in efficiency and productivity.
Right. So the first half of this year, 2025, solar and storage are 82% of new U.S. electricity capacity.
Wow.
So it's doing 82% of the work year to date. Like, so you can't afford to kneecap that. Like, it's doing all the work.
Well, and that's kind of why you and our argument has been, is if you're a big believer in nuclear, which we certainly are, then I think you need to also simultaneously be a big believer in solar and nat gas.
Yeah.
Right. Because nuclear takes a lot longer to come online. So if you're a big believer in nuclear, so are we, which is why we also own solar and nat gas.
Right. Exactly.
Because you got to get something to fill that gap in the meantime.
You need them all. So if one of them gets really cheap all of a sudden on a relative basis, like, it deserves a hard look. And I even think that will eventually apply to wind. I think it's the least among the sources, but if it gets cheap enough, like, we have to have it all.
Yeah. Especially if the technology improves. I mean, the way they rolled out wind, I thought was just ridiculous, just because you're like, guys, there's no way you're ever going to get the power production out of these wind farms. It makes sense at this scale.
I'm literally biased against them. I just am. Like,
I know.
There's no two ways about it. I went back to my hometown that first time in like a decade, and they're everywhere.
Well, and that's because you know the math.
Yeah.
And all the problems.
And they're bad for the
break,
environment.
and they're bad for the environment. Yeah. And they're eyesores, and they're all this. And and they're not better for the environment than that gas. They're just not.
Yeah.
Full stop.
The giant offshore ones in places that are always windy, like off the coast of the UK or something, like I can understand it to a degree, but just like sprawled out all over the heartland, I don't.
Well, and then you even look at some of the like extrapolations. You're like, okay, if we do that and invest this is how much energy we're getting out of it. And
the maintenance costs and stuff, the replacement costs, like all the stuff that no one ever, puts into the
equation.
Right. But again, like, you probably need it all. So you might have to spin it back up. You might have to spin coal back up in a bigger way. Like it's going to be an all hands on deck thing.
Yeah.
Not a like politically preferred hands on deck.
Right.
Which both sides have done, back to back. Like, one side's like, well, fossil fuels are bad. And now it's like, oh, well, renewable bad. And like, hey, with AI, like, it's all good. Like, I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. All right, man. Well, that does it for me. I don't know about you. And hope you, as always, you can find us on social media. Just search Know Your Risk Podcast. Search it in YouTube. You can get the video feeds. Hope you all have a wonderful evening, and hug your loved ones. Tell them you love them. And like I said, let's just all focus on trying to put a little bit more humanity and compassion even into just passing interactions we have with people every day. Don't mistake this as me being Pollyannish or not angry about this. I am. My mind just goes, this feels like a red alert. This feels like an alarm bell going off. And I just think we all need to take a step back from the abyss, Anyway, have a wonderful evening. We will see you again tomorrow. You are listening to Know Your Risk Podcast. Download and subscribe at knowyourriskpodcast.com.
Investment advice cannot be given without a client service agreement. Zach Abraham is an investment advisor representative of Trek Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor. Bulwark Capital Management is a marketing name only and does not carry a separate registration.